Hey everyone, this is Cassandra at K's Gem Creations, and I'm here with a really quick tutorial on how to make a simple wire wrap pendant using only square copper wire, which I just showed you at 20 gauges, and some half round copper wire at 22 gauges, and both of these came from Rio Grande. I've got some flush cutters today, some chain nose pliers, there are some round nose pliers, these are nylon pliers for compression and smoothing. And I've also got my favorite tool, some bent nose pliers. And aside from that, all I'm going to need is a ruler. And the cabochon I'm working with today is a really nice teal labradorite, which is about 1.5 inches tall. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure out my square copper wire. I'm using 4 pieces of this wire and I'm measuring them at 14 inches. And I'm going to speed through some of this because it's just measuring and cutting 4 pieces of wire. So once I've got those 4 pieces of wire cut, I'm also going to snip off a piece of half round wire. So the structure of the pendant is made with this square copper wire, but everything is bound together with this thinner half round stuff. And I'm going to take my 4 wires here and line them all up so they're in a nice straight row of 4. And I'm going to use a ruler in a second here just to go ahead and measure kind of exactly the halfway point of those 4 pieces of wire, and that's where I'm going to start winding with the flat side down this half round wire just around all 4 of these here. And so this is forming the bottom of the pendant, and everything else is going to flow from this point. Every time I take a rotation, I'm just smoothing it out and making sure it's always the flat side down that I'm applying. And once I've gotten to the end of this little bundle of wires here, I'm just going to pick which side is going to be the inside of the pendant and which side is going to be the front or the outside. And I'm going to cut off my wire on the inside of the pendant so that that cut side, once everything is folded together, the cut side is going to be touching the stone and not able to be accessed from the outside of the necklace. And I'm going to take my nylon pliers to just compress everything and make sure it's looking nice and neat. And then with the inside facing away from me, I'm just going to use my fingers to start curving the wire in the general rounded shape that I'm looking for the bottom. And then I'm going to grab my cabochon and I'm going to lay everything flat on my work surface. I'm going to hold on to the stone with my left hand along with that frame, and then I'm going to use my right hand to draw all these wires around the outside of the cabochon and start getting the general shape I'm looking for my necklace. And I'll just kind of give it a squeeze to bend that wire. And once I pick it up, I can kind of refine everything and really get some definition in that curve here. But I don't want any strong angles because these wires still need to have a little bit of room to move around. So once I've got the shape that I'm looking for, I'm just going to make sure everything still fits really nicely. And then I'm going to work on getting the 2 sides of my frame wires lined up with each other up at the top. This is where we're going to do the bale a little bit later. But for right now, I just want to make sure everything is lined up really, really nicely. If things get kind of twisted up at this point, it's really hard to fix later on. And then I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap wire that I had kicking around from another project, and I'm going to tightly but not permanently wrap this around the two sides of my frame here just to get everything all bound at the top. Again, nothing permanent. These wires still need to be able to move around. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut myself off just another couple pieces of half round wire, not very big, maybe 2 inches each, a little bit longer than that. And I'm going to use these to add a little bit of extra support to the sides of my frame. So this is adding, eventually it's going to be adding some visual detail, but it's also adding some support to make sure that that stone, once it's in place, can't pop out the sides of the frame. And so it's just the same as the bottom of the frame. I'm just wrapping it with the flat side down. I'm wrapping it 5 times for this one here, but you can do as many as you like. And before I compress that, I'm going to make sure that the other side is done as well. This one was made a little bit off center. I really like doing asymmetrical sort of pieces, but you can make them really exact if you want to, or you could really exaggerate that difference if you like as well. And just like with the bottom, I'm making sure that those wires are cut side in, and I am cutting those away so that once that stone is trapped, it can't be touched from the outside. This just makes sure everything is nice and secure and it can't scratch you or get caught on your clothing. And once I've decided those positions, I'm going to take those nylon pliers again and compress those 2 little bundles of wire down and make them nice and smooth. So at this point, I'm going to start securing the stone in place. I'm going to choose which is the back side of my pendant. And I'm going to use my round nose pliers to start bending inwards the very last wire on this frame. So the one closest towards the back, I'm going to grab onto with my round nose pliers and just tweak it inward. And you can see with that sort of levering motion, I've pulled that wire downwards and inwards and it forms these little triangles. And these are what's forming the structure on the back of the pendant to trap the flat side of that cabochon in place. And I'm going to do this 4 times in total. So basically everywhere there's a little bundle of those half round wires, I'm just going to do another one of those little supports. I'm also using my bent nose pliers here just to kind of clean up that opening. I want to make sure I actually have a lot of negative space up at the top of this pendant here, because that's going to be helpful at the end process when we're dealing with anchoring off some final wires. And then you can see with those little triangles in the back, or those little prongs in the back, that stone sits nice and securely and it can't pop out the back of the pendant. Now for the front of the pendant, it follows a similar sort of structure. We need to make sure that that wire is coming up around the face of the stone though, just to make sure that it can't pop out the front, because cabochons are curved stones. So I'm going to adjust things a little bit further and make sure I like the way it's all sitting, but again, no hard angles because this wire still needs room to slide downwards and over the face of that stone. And so once I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and take my round nose pliers again and start working on trapping that stone a little bit further in the front. You want to be a little bit more careful at this point too, and try and be really steady just to make sure you don't accidentally crack your stone, although, you know, they're a lot more resilient than they seem, but always better to be cautious and not wreck a cabochon. So again, I'm just going around to everywhere there's one of those little bundles of the half round wire. I'm going to be using my round nose pliers to pull it outwards and over the face of the stone. And I'm also going to grab the second wire as well. This is just to add a little bit of extra detail to the face of the pendant. And once all of those are bent over the face of the stone, this is where I can do a little bit more manipulating of the wire just to make sure I'm liking the shape that it's taking. Because once you start getting this bale worked out, things become slightly more permanent and it gets a little bit harder to bend these wires around after this point. So for this bale, I'm using more half round wire and I'm just going to work right off the spool at this point here. And same as before, I'm going to lay it flat side down and I'm going to start wrapping right along the top where all 8 of those wires have come together. And this is where we're going to start forming the bale. And once I've got a few rotations done, I can take off that scrap piece of wire here and really start clamping down on this little bundle and slide it around a little bit if I need to. And I'll also trap this little tail end of the wire in place here so that it's tucked out of the way. So I'm going to take that tail end and I'm just going to pop it through that opening that I left there intentionally. And I'll pull it pretty tightly with my pliers, kind of upwards and outwards to really get it lodged into the 2 sides of that frame. And I'll do that a second time as well before I take my flush cutters and snip really, really close to the pendant. And then at this point, I'm not cutting the rest of the wire. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the very front 2 wires, the first one on each side of the frame here. I'm going to move them away from the rest of the wires and continue wrapping this half round wire just around these 2. And this is what's going to form my bale. It's a little slow moving in the beginning where that curve is up near the top, but once we get to that flat stretch of wire, everything starts to move really, really quickly. So I'll speed that up a little bit so you can see how that kind of happens. So I'm just holding the wire in place with my forefinger and thumb on my dominant hand and rotating the entire pendant with my non-dominant hand. And that wire just wants to lay itself down exactly where you lay it, essentially. And this is what's going to form a little bit of structure to this bale here. And then once I've got what I think is going to be a pretty good length, plus a little bit extra, I'm going to compress everything down again with those nylon pliers, and I'm going to work on shaping this bale. So I still haven't cut that wire. I'm going to be using it again further on in this project. But for right now, to form the bale, I want to separate my wires. I've got 2 moved to the left and 4 to the right. And then through that opening, I'm just bending my bale around my thumb and then closing the gap. And then I can take the existing length of wire that's still attached to the spool and start wrapping back upwards from where I started at the very beginning of that bale. And most of this area is going to be pretty well covered, but I still want to take my time and try and make sure everything's looking nice and neat at this point. I'm also going to select a wire from my right hand side of the pendant where I've got more like extra wires. And this is where I am going to single that one out and continue wrapping this half round wire just around this one singled out base wire. Now at this point, this isn't doing anything in terms of structure. Everything is secure, my bale is made, everything after this point is essentially just extras. to use up some of the wire that I've cut for myself and to add some extra dimension and bulk to the top. I also like using half round wire to add texture. It's not always evident when the wire is unoxidized, but once it becomes antiqued and a little bit of that darkness stays in the grooves there, then you wind up with some really nice texture. So I'm going to wrap that wire all the way down this base wire as far as I can get, because I'd like to make sure I have too much wire than too little. And then I'll just cut off that end. There's a couple of spots where things got a little bit mangled, but I think it should be pretty well camouflaged. So I will pull this one back up to where the rest of the wires are sitting. And I'm also going to take one of these bale wires and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take some of this half round wire and I'm going to wrap it around one of them. Again, just adding some texture and some visual interest here to an additional wire. And at this point here, I can take care of that tail end. I'm going to snip it really short and then push this whole coil down towards the inside of that bale just to make sure there's no sharp edges or there's no wires that can get caught and start to unravel. And once that's all pushed in tight, I'll just continue twisting my pendant, holding that half round wire in place, and then just spinning everything around to make sure that that wire gets laid down flat until I reach just about the end. So now to take care of these wires, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the right, the one closest towards the front of the pendant, and I'm going to curve it downwards and over the face of my bale. So it forms this nice little C shape. And then I'm going to take the second wire, follow that along, and as well the wire that's covered in that half round wire, I'm going to follow suit as well. And then the fourth wire, just like that. And then with my right hand, I'm going to hold on to those curves that I made just to make sure that they don't budge, because I really like the shape of those. But the more you pull on these wires, the more they can become distorted. So if you hang on to that, then you don't have to worry about distorting your work. I'm also going to take the two wires on the left side of the pendant and a little bit lower, I'm going to curve them slightly and then over the front of the bale. And then I'll twist them around so that they follow the rest of the wires that we moved forward. And I'm still holding on to those curves. And then I'm going to take all 6 of those wires and pull them all the way to the back. This is where we're going to anchor all of these wires down, and this is why I wanted to have a little bit of negative space up top. So once I've cut all these wires so that there's about ½ centimeter or so of overhang, I'm going to use my bent nose pliers to start folding them inward and clamping the ends of those wires to the inside and the outside of the frame. It looks almost like a bobby pin if you looked at it from the side. So I'm taking my bent nose pliers and one at a time or two at a time, folding those cut ends inward and anchoring them down. I'm squeezing pretty tightly to make sure they're secure. And then with my last 2 wires, the two ends of those bale wires, I'm going to move these forward, and then I'm going to hold them down in the middle here with my thumb and just do one nice big loop that kind of overlaps the face of the stone, but not way too much. And I'm going to take that outside wire and just kind of push it open slightly so that there's a little bit of an opening or a gap between the two wires. And then I am again going to fold these all the way to the back, trim them off so that there's about a 1/2 centimeter of overhang. And then I'm going to anchor these in place just with my bent nose pliers, same as the rest of them. And once I'm happy with how secure that's feeling, I'm going to flip the pendant over, kind of inspect it from all angles, make sure everything is looking straight. The wire is still pretty malleable, so if you're not liking the shape, you can kind of sort of push things around a little bit just to bend them into the shape that you're looking for. I'm just kind of looking for nice, clean swoops from all angles. But with that, the pendant's essentially finished. So this is a labradorite pendant with square and half round copper wire. Relatively beginner friendly, and you definitely don't need to do all this extra detail here with all of the extra half round wire. You can keep all of those clean on top. This is just something I like to do for fun. And so with that, the pendant's done. If you want to try this for yourself and show me your finished work, I would love to see it. You can tag me at Kay's Gem Creations on Instagram and TikTok. I love seeing what you guys are coming up with based on my little how-to videos. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon with some more tutorials.